Welcome back to Geopolitical Owl, where behind every border lies a blueprint. I'm your host, and I've been studying conflicts like this for years, and what strikes me most about the Armenia-Azerbaijan dispute is how personal it becomes for the people living through it. This isn't just about land on a map. This is about families torn apart, neighbors who became enemies, and how the ghosts of imperial decisions still haunt millions of people today. This is part one of our deep dive into the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict, the origins. Now, I need to be upfront with you. Understanding this conflict requires us to travel back over a century to when these nations didn't even exist as we know them today. As I researched this story, I was struck by how decisions made in distant imperial capitals would determine the fate of ordinary people who just wanted to live peacefully in their ancestral homes. The roots of this conflict stretch deep into the twilight of empires and the birth of modern nations. So let's uncover together how geography, religion, and imperial ambitions created a powder keg that's still exploding today. I want you to imagine the Caucasus in the early 1800s, a mountainous crossroads where three great empires met. The Ottoman Empire to the west, Persia to the south, and the expanding Russian Empire from the north. When I look at historical maps from this period, what's fascinating is how fluid these borders were. This wasn't just empty territory. It was the ultimate strategic prize, and the people living there had little say in their fate. In 1813, Russia forced Persia to sign the Treaty of Gulistan, gaining control over northern Azerbaijan and parts of the eastern Caucasus. Then in 1828, the Treaty of Turkmenchay handed Russia even more territory, including the Yerevan and Nakhichevan Khanates. Now, these weren't just lines on a map. They were reshuffling entire peoples and cultures, families who had lived in these regions for generations. But here's what I find crucial to understand. Russia didn't just want land. They wanted loyal populations. Armenian Christian, who had faced persecution under Ottoman and Persian rule, suddenly found themselves with a powerful Orthodox Christian protector. The Russians actively encouraged Armenian migration into these newly conquered territories, fundamentally changing the region's demographics in ways that still matter today. Meanwhile, the Turkic-speaking Muslim populations, who would later identify as Azerbaijanis, found themselves under Russian rule for the first time. Imagine being a farmer or merchant in Baku, suddenly having to navigate a completely different political system. The stage was being set for competing claims to the same land that would echo through the centuries. Now, here's where the story gets really complex, and I think it's important we understand this part carefully. Modern Armenian and Azerbaijani national identities didn't exist in 1800s. They were forged in the crucible of the 19th century, shaped by real people, making difficult choices about who they were and where they belonged. Armenians had a shared Christian faith, ancient cultural traditions, and a written language, but they were scattered across Ottoman, Persian, and Russian territories. The Russian conquest created something entirely new, a concentrated Armenian population with political protection and growing national consciousness. For Azerbaijanis, the story was different, but equally human. The Turkic-speaking Shia Muslims of the region identified more with their local Khanates, or with the broader Islamic world. The concept of a unified Azerbaijani identity emerged gradually, accelerated by contact with European nationalist ideas and the practical need to organize politically under Russian rule. Then oil changed everything. When I studied the discovery of massive petroleum reserves around Baku in the 1870s, I realized this wasn't just about wealth. It was about human opportunity and resentment. Armenians, with their commercial networks and education, often became middlemen and entrepreneurs. This economic success created real tensions with some Muslim population who felt marginalized in their own homeland. Religion wasn't just about faith. It became a marker of political loyalty and survival. Christian Armenians were seen as Russia's natural allies, while Muslim Azerbaijanis were viewed with suspicion as potential Persian or Ottoman sympathizers. Imagine living each day knowing that your religious identity isn't just a matter of personal faith, but a factor that could shape your political destiny. The first major warning signs came from the Ottoman Empire. Between 1894 and 1896, Sultan Abdul Hamid II orchestrated what came to be known as the Hamidian Massacres. Conservative estimates suggest 100,000 to 200,000 Armenians were killed across the Ottoman territories. Not soldiers in a war, but ordinary people. This was a systematic campaign that sent shockwaves through Armenian communities worldwide. These massacres had a profound impact on Armenians in the Russian Empire. They saw what could happen to their people and began organizing politically and militarily. The Ottoman events also influenced Russian policy. St. Petersburg saw an opportunity to position itself as the protector of all Armenians, not just those in Russian territory. The 1905 Russian Revolution brought the first direct Armenian-Azerbaijani clashes, and this is where neighbor turned against neighbor. In Baku and other mixed cities, economic grievances exploded into ethnic violence. To point out, Armenians and Azerbaijanis, who had lived as neighbors for generations, who had shared meals and celebrated each other's festivals, suddenly found themselves on opposite sides of deadly street battles. But the real breaking point came with World War I. In 1915, the Ottoman Empire began what historians now recognize as the Armenian Genocide, the systematic extermination of an estimated 800,000 to 1.5 million Armenians. This wasn't just a humanitarian catastrophe. It was a geopolitical earthquake that reshaped the entire region and left scars that still persist today. When the Russian Empire collapsed in 1917, the Caucasus suddenly faced a power vacuum. For the first time in centuries, local peoples had a chance to determine their own fate. In May 1918, both the Democratic Republic of Armenia and the Azerbaijan Democratic Republic declared independence within days of each other. But their borders overlapped catastrophically, especially in the regions of Karabakh, Zanzibar, and Nakhichevan. Imagine the hope these newly independent peoples must have felt, only to realize they were claiming the same land their neighbors considered theirs. What followed was the First Armenian-Azerbaijani War of 1918 to 1920. This wasn't just a border dispute. It was an existential struggle. Armenian forces, many comprised of survivors fleeing the Ottoman genocide, fought desperately for secure territory, where they could rebuild their lives. Azerbaijani forces, initially supported by Ottoman troops, sought to establish control over what they saw as their historic lands. Both sides believed they were fighting for survival. The fighting was brutal, and reading the accounts from this period is heartbreaking. Entire villages were massacred, populations were displaced, and ancient communities that had coexisted for centuries were destroyed. In just 2 years, the conflict claimed tens of thousands of lives and established patterns of ethnic cleansing that would repeat throughout the 20th century. The war ended not with victory, but with Soviet conquest. In 1920, the Red Army occupied both republics, imposing communist rule and freezing the territorial disputes, but not resolving them. Notably, the Soviets essentially put a lid on a boiling pot, but they never turned off the heat. The seeds of today's conflict were planted in this chaotic period between empires. Imperial policies created competing demographic claims. National awakenings produced irreconcilable identities. And the collapse of old orders led to wars that nobody truly won. The Soviets would try to manage these tensions for 70 years. But as we'll see in our next episode, their solution only delayed the inevitable. Now, I want to be clear. Understanding these origins isn't about assigning blame or taking sides. It's about recognizing how history shapes the present and how the decisions of past generations continue to affect real people today. Next week, I'll take you deep into Part 2, Nagorno-Karabakh, the heart of the conflicts, where we'll explore how a small mountainous region became the epicenter of this century-old dispute. Remember, here at Geopolitical Owl, behind every border lies a blueprint, and Karabakh's blueprint was written in blood and carved in stone. And if you found this helpful, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss Part 2. Until next time, stay informed, stay ahead.